The transport shuttle bumped and shook as it descended through the artificial atmosphere of Station Omega-7. Alex pressed his face against the small window and watched the massive training facility grow larger below them. The Galactic Defense Academy looked like a floating city made of metal and glass, with dozens of training chambers jutting out from the main structure like mechanical flowers. Around him, the other new cadets filled the shuttle with nervous chatter in languages he could barely understand. The tall, scaly Draknari whispered to each other in their growling tongue, while their yellow eyes flicked toward Alex with obvious curiosity. The four-armed Viridians moved with fluid grace even in the cramped shuttle seats, their pale blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. The crystalline quartzlings made soft, chiming sounds when they communicated, their bodies catching and reflecting light in beautiful patterns. Alex felt completely out of place among these impressive beings. He was just a human from Earth, the newest member species of the Galactic Alliance. His people had only achieved faster-than-light travel 100 years ago, which made them practically infants compared to the ancient civilizations around him. The shuttle docked with a gentle thud, and the door hissed open. A massive Draknari in military uniform stood waiting for them in the docking bay. His scales were darker than the young cadets, with scars crisscrossing his thick hide like a roadmap of old battles. The nameplate on his chest read, Commander Thorn, in several different languages. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," Commander Thorn rumbled, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "You have been selected from billions of candidates across the galaxy. You represent the finest warriors your species have to offer." The commander's eyes swept across the group and lingered on Alex for a moment longer than the others. Alex could practically feel the doubt radiating from the alien officer. A human warrior? The idea seemed almost laughable to most of the galaxy. "Follow me to the orientation hall," Thorn commanded, turning on his heel and marching toward a large doorway. The cadets scrambled to keep up with his long strides. The orientation hall was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a holographic display of stars and nebulae. Hundreds of seats were arranged in a perfect circle around a central platform. Alex found himself sitting between a nervous quartzling named Pip and a confident Viridian called Lyra. Commander Thorn stepped onto the central platform, and his image was immediately magnified by holographic projectors so everyone could see him clearly. "The training you will receive here is not a game," he began. "You will face 12 levels of combat simulation, each designed to push your natural abilities to their absolute limits. The scenarios will test everything your species evolved to do best." He gestured, and holographic images began floating around the hall, showing different alien species in combat. Draknari used their armored scales and natural strength to smash through enemy lines. Viridians danced through the air with multiple weapons, their four arms allowing them to attack from impossible angles. Quartzlings formed crystal barriers and fired focused energy beams with deadly precision. "Each simulation adapts to your species' advantages," Thorn continued. "The Academy has trained warriors from over 300 different worlds. We know exactly what each species can and cannot do." Pip leaned over to Alex and whispered in surprisingly good English, "What advantages do humans have?" "I have read your species files, but they seem quite limited." Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It was a fair question, and one he had asked himself many times since arriving at the Academy. Humans had no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no energy projection abilities, no extra limbs. They were not particularly fast or agile compared to most species. Their senses were adequate, but not exceptional. Lyra overheard the question and joined the whispered conversation. "Perhaps humans have some hidden ability that is not well documented?" she suggested, though her tone made it clear she doubted this possibility. "Maybe they are very intelligent," Pip offered hopefully. Alex appreciated their attempt to be polite, but he knew the truth. Humans had gotten into the Academy through a combination of political pressure and affirmative action. The Galactic Alliance wanted to include their newest members in military training, even if those members were not naturally suited for combat. Commander Thorne's voice boomed across the hall again. The failure rate at this academy is 73%. Those who cannot meet our standards will be returned to their home worlds in disgrace. Those who succeed will become officers in the Galactic Defense Force and protect innocent lives across the galaxy. The holographic displays changed to show famous Academy graduates leading fleets into battle against space pirates and hostile alien invasions. Every single graduate shown was from one of the traditional warrior species. No humans appeared in the victory montages. Your first combat simulation begins tomorrow at dawn, Thorne announced. You will face automated combat drones in a controlled environment. This is considered the easiest test you will encounter here. I suggest you rest well and prepare mentally for what lies ahead. As the cadets filed out of the orientation hall, Alex could hear them talking excitedly about the upcoming test. The Draknari discussed which plasma weapons they would choose. The Viridians planned complex aerial maneuvers. The Quartzlings calculated optimal energy discharge patterns. Alex walked alone toward the dormitory section, his mind racing with doubts. Tomorrow he would have to prove that humans belonged among the galaxy's elite warriors. The problem was, he had no idea how he was going to do that. The dormitory corridors were filled with cadets from dozens of different species, all preparing for the challenge ahead. Some were meditating, others were practicing combat forms, and a few were studying technical manuals about the Academy's weapons systems. Alex found his assigned room and sat on the simple bed provided. Through his small window, he could see one of the Academy's training chambers where older cadets were practicing with advanced holographic opponents. They moved with the fluid confidence of natural-born fighters. Tomorrow would reveal whether humanity truly belonged in this place, or if they were just fooling themselves about their potential as galactic defenders. Alex closed his eyes and tried to quiet the voice in his head that whispered he was about to embarrass his entire species in front of the galaxy's finest warriors. The training chamber hummed with energy as holographic emitters warmed up for the day's first combat simulation. Alex stood in line with the other cadets, watching as each species took their turn against the automated drones. His stomach felt like it was tied in knots, but he kept his expression calm and focused. The Draknari cadets went first, their thick scales deflecting drone attacks while they wielded heavy plasma rifles with ease. Their natural armor allowed them to charge straight through enemy fire, crushing the mechanical opponents with brute force. The watching cadets cheered and roared approval as each Draknari completed the course with impressive efficiency. Next came the Viridians, and Alex had to admit their performance was beautiful to watch. They seemed to dance through the air, their four arms working independently to wield multiple weapons, while their graceful movements made them nearly impossible targets. One Viridian cadet named Lyra spun through a group of 6 drones, disabling them all within seconds using a combination of energy pistols and vibro blades. The Quartzlings approached the challenge differently, using their natural ability to form crystal barriers while focusing their internal energy into devastating beam attacks. They moved slower than the other species, but with perfect precision, calculating each shot to maximize damage while conserving energy. As Alex's turn approached, he could hear the whispered conversations around him growing louder. Several cadets were placing actual bets on how quickly he would fail. A group of Draknari were laughing as they discussed whether the human would even be able to lift the standard energy weapons. I heard humans can barely see in normal light conditions, one Viridian whispered to another. Their reaction times are supposed to be incredibly slow compared to civilized species. Perhaps the Academy is conducting some kind of scientific experiment, suggested a Quartzling, testing how quickly an inferior species can be eliminated by the drones. Commander Thorne called Alex's name, and the entire chamber fell quiet. Every cadet, instructor, and observer turned to watch as the lone human stepped into the combat zone. The holographic environment materialized around him, creating the appearance of a ruined cityscape with plenty of cover and obstacles. 6 combat drones activated simultaneously, their red sensors sweeping the area as they began their programmed attack patterns. The weapon racks along the walls offered an impressive selection of energy rifles, plasma pistols, vibro weapons, and defensive shields. Every other cadet had immediately rushed to arm themselves with the most powerful weapons available. Alex ignored the weapons completely. Instead, he moved forward with a fluid motion that seemed almost casual to the watching aliens. The first drone locked onto him and fired a blast of stunning energy that should have dropped him instantly. Alex twisted his body at the last possible moment, letting the energy bolt pass harmlessly by his shoulder. The drone recalibrated and fired again, but Alex was already moving. He ducked under the second blast and closed the distance with surprising speed. When he reached the mechanical opponent, he did something that made every alien in the chamber freeze in shock. Alex struck the drone with his bare hand. His fingers found a small gap between the drone's armor plates and pressed hard. There was a soft click, and the drone's systems shut down completely. It fell to the ground like a broken toy. The second drone attacked from behind, but Alex seemed to sense it coming without even looking. He spun and grabbed the machine's weapon arm, using its own momentum to throw it against a nearby wall. The impact shattered the drone's central processor, and it collapsed in a shower of sparks. The remaining 4 drones surrounded him, firing in coordinated patterns that should have been impossible to avoid. Alex moved between the energy blasts like he was dancing, his feet never staying in one place for more than a heartbeat. He reached the third drone and struck it twice in rapid succession, each blow hitting a different vulnerable point. The machine sparked and died. The fourth drone tried to ram him with its heavy chassis, but Alex stepped aside at the last moment and guided its charge into the fifth drone. Both machines crashed together and fell in a tangled heap of metal and wire. The final drone backed away and switched to rapid-fire mode, filling the air with a deadly stream of energy bolts. Alex picked up a piece of debris from the ruined cityscape and threw it with perfect accuracy. The chunk of concrete struck the drone's main sensor array, blinding it completely. While it spun in confusion, Alex approached calmly and shut it down with another precise strike to its control systems. The entire simulation had lasted less than 3 minutes. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every alien face showed the same expression of complete bewilderment. Commander Thorne stared at his instruments, checking and rechecking the readings. According to the Academy's records, Alex had just completed the drone course faster than any cadet in the institution's history, and he had done it without using a single weapon. Alex walked out of the combat zone, breathing slightly harder than normal, but otherwise appearing completely calm. The other cadets parted before him like he was carrying some kind of dangerous disease. "How?" Lyra whispered, her 4 arms hanging limply at her sides. "How is that possible?" Alex looked around, at the stunned faces surrounding him. "Is there a problem?" he asked innocently. Commander Thorne found his voice first. "Cadet Alex, report to my office immediately after the session ends. The rest of you, continue with your scheduled training." But none of the other cadets moved. They stood frozen, staring at the human who had just redefined their understanding of what was possible in combat. The betting pool that had formed earlier was completely forgotten as the aliens tried to process what they had witnessed. In the space of 3 minutes, Alex had transformed from a curiosity into something much more unsettling. The weak species, from the edge of the galaxy, had just demonstrated abilities that none of their advanced sensors and databases had detected. The question on every alien mind was the same. If humans could do this, what else were they hiding? News of Alex's performance spread through the Academy faster than a plasma fire in an oxygen-rich environment. By evening, cadets from every species were gathering in the common areas to discuss what they had witnessed. The conversations were heated, confused, and filled with wild theories about human capabilities. In the Academy's database center, several instructors worked late into the night pulling up every piece of information available about Earth and its inhabitants. The files painted a picture of a relatively peaceful world populated by beings with no remarkable physical attributes. Nothing in the official records suggested that humans possessed any special combat abilities. Alex tried to eat his dinner in peace, but everywhere he went, conversations stopped and eyes followed his movements. The cafeteria, which had been buzzing with typical cadet chatter, fell silent when he entered. Even the automated food dispensers seemed to take longer than usual, as if they too were trying to figure out what made this human different. Pip, the young quartzling, finally worked up the courage to approach Alex's table. "May I sit with you?" the crystalline being asked, their voice making soft chiming sounds. "Of course," Alex replied, grateful for any company that did not involve staring or whispered conversations about his species. "I have been thinking about your performance today," Pip said carefully. "In my culture, we spend centuries studying the mathematical principles behind combat efficiency. Your movements today violated several fundamental laws of physics as we understand them." Alex looked up from his meal. "Which laws?" "Conservation of momentum, optimal energy expenditure, predictive targeting algorithms," Pip listed, their crystal body flickering with different colors as they became more excited. "You moved in patterns that should have been impossible to sustain, and you struck targets with precision that exceeded our best computer-guided systems." Before Alex could respond, Lyra approached their table. The Viridian cadet moved with her usual grace, but Alex noticed a new wariness in her movements. "May I join this discussion?" she asked. "Please do," Alex said, gesturing to an empty chair. Lyra settled herself carefully, her four arms folding in a complex pattern that Alex was beginning to recognize as a sign of deep thought among her species. "I have been analyzing your combat footage," she said. "My people have fought in 17 different galactic conflicts over the past millennium. We pride ourselves on understanding all forms of combat arts." She paused, and Alex could see the confusion in her large, dark eyes. "Your fighting style does not match anything in our historical records. It appears to be a combination of at least 6 different martial disciplines, but adapted in ways that should not work together. Maybe humans developed their own fighting methods," Pip suggested. "That is what troubles me," Lyra continued. "According to our intelligence files, Earth is a peaceful world. Your species has not fought any major wars for over a century. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Alex considered his answer carefully. These beings seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile, and he found himself wanting to give them an honest response. "Earth might seem peaceful now, but it was not always that way. My people spent thousands of years fighting each other, and before that, we spent millions of years fighting everything else on our planet just to survive." "But that was in your past," Lyra pointed out. "How does ancient history translate into modern combat skills?" "We remember," Alex said simply. "Every technique, every strategy, every lesson learned through necessity gets passed down and refined. We may not fight wars anymore, but we never stopped studying how to fight them." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Thorn. The massive Draknari approached their table with heavy footsteps that made the floor vibrate. "Cadet Alex, I need to speak with you privately." Alex excused himself from his new friends and followed the commander to a quieter section of the cafeteria. Thorn's yellow eyes studied the human with an intensity that made Alex feel like a specimen under a microscope. "I have reviewed the combat footage 17 times, Thorn said without preamble. "I have consulted with every combat instructor at this academy. None of us can explain what you did today." "Is that a problem, sir?" Alex asked. "It might be," Thorn replied. "Tomorrow you will face the zero-gravity combat simulation. It is designed to test how well different species adapt to fighting in space environments. Most cadets struggle significantly with this challenge." The commander leaned closer, his scarred face showing genuine concern. The simulation uses advanced AI opponents that adapt to your fighting style in real time. They will analyze your movements from today and develop countermeasures. If you have been hiding your true capabilities, tomorrow would be the time to reveal them. Alex met the alien's gaze steadily. I understand, sir. Thorne studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. Report to Training Base 7 at 0800 hours. And Cadet, be prepared for increased scrutiny. Word of your performance has reached the Academy's senior command. They will be watching tomorrow's test personally. As Alex returned to his table, he found that Pip and Lyra had been joined by several other cadets. The group fell silent as he approached, but their expressions were no longer dismissive or mocking. Instead, they looked at him with something that might have been respect mixed with a healthy dose of wariness. Is everything all right? Lyra asked. Just discussing tomorrow's training, Alex replied, sitting back down. The zero-gravity simulation, Pip said, their crystal body dimming slightly. That test has a 48% failure rate, even among species naturally adapted for space combat. Alex nodded thoughtfully. He had reviewed the Academy's training, protocols before arriving, and he knew that tomorrow's challenge would be significantly more difficult than today's drone exercise. The question was whether his performance today had been a fluke, or if humans really did possess combat abilities that the galaxy had not yet recognized. As the evening wore on and the cadets gradually returned to their dormitories, Alex found himself looking forward to tomorrow's test with a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. He was beginning to suspect that Earth's children might have more to offer the galaxy than anyone had imagined. The real question was whether the galaxy was ready to accept that possibility. The observation deck overlooking Training Base 7 was packed with more beings than Alex had ever seen in one place at the Academy. Word of the humans' impossible performance had spread beyond the cadet ranks, and now senior instructors, visiting, dignitaries, and even some high-ranking military officers had come to witness his next test. Alex floated in the zero-gravity chamber, using small bursts from his maneuvering thrusters to maintain position. Around him, the holographic environment flickered to life, creating the appearance of a damaged space station with debris floating in all directions. This was the Academy's most challenging individual combat scenario, designed to test how well cadets could fight in the unforgiving environment of space. Through the observation windows, he could see Commander Thorne speaking with a group of officers Alex did not recognize. Their uniforms bore the insignia of the Galactic Defense Force's highest ranks, and their expressions ranged from curious to openly skeptical. The simulation began without warning. Enemy combatants materialized throughout the space station, their weapons already charging for attack. These were not simple drones like yesterday's test, but advanced AI opponents programmed with the combat knowledge of dozens of different species. They moved with fluid coordination, using the zero-gravity environment to their advantage. Alex had barely a second to orient himself before the first attacks came. Energy bolts streaked through the vacuum around him, forcing him to twist and spin to avoid being hit. In zero gravity, every movement had consequences, and most cadets struggled to maintain control while dodging enemy fire. But Alex moved through the weightless environment like he had been born there. He used the floating debris as cover and as weapons, grabbing chunks of metal and hurling them at his opponents with devastating accuracy. When an enemy tried to flank him from above, Alex kicked off a nearby wall and intercepted the attack with a spinning maneuver that would have been impossible under normal gravity. The AI opponents adapted quickly to his tactics, trying to corner him in areas with less debris to use as weapons. Alex responded by changing his entire approach, using the walls and ceiling of the space station to bounce between enemies like a ricocheting bullet. His bare hands found weak points in their armor with mechanical precision, disabling each opponent, before moving to the next target. In the observation deck, the watching officers leaned forward in their seats. General Corax, a veteran Draknari commander with scales scarred by countless battles, turned to Thorn with confusion written across his reptilian features. "How is he moving like that?" Corax growled. "Zero-gravity combat requires years of specialized training. According to his files, this human has never been in space before arriving at the Academy." Thorn could only shake his head in response. "I have stopped trying to understand what this cadet is capable of, General. I am simply documenting his performance for analysis." Below them, Alex had engaged the final group of AI opponents in the most difficult section of the simulation. The artificial enemies had positioned themselves in a defensive formation that should have been impossible to break without heavy weapons or specialized equipment. Instead of attacking directly, Alex did something that made every military observer freeze in shock. He began dismantling the space station itself. Using debris as improvised tools, Alex systematically destroyed key structural supports and power conduits. The holographic environment began to collapse around the AI opponents, forcing them out of their defensive positions. As they scattered to avoid the falling debris, Alex picked them off one by one with thrown objects and precise strikes to their vital systems. The simulation ended with Alex floating alone among the wreckage of the space station, completely unharmed, and breathing only slightly harder than when he had started. The timer showed that he had completed the zero-gravity combat course in less than half the previous record time. The observation deck was absolutely silent. General Corax was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "In 40 years of military service, I have never seen anything like that. What exactly are humans?" Before anyone could attempt an answer, Alex's voice came through the communication system from the training chamber. "Requesting permission to continue to the next simulation level, sir." Commander Thorn looked around at the assembled officers, all of whom appeared to be in various states of shock. "Cadet Alex, you are aware that most students require several days to recover between zero-gravity simulations?" "I feel fine, sir," Alex replied. "If the next test is available, I would like to proceed." General Corax stood up abruptly, his massive frame casting shadows across the observation deck. "Commander Thorn, I want that human tested at the highest difficulty levels immediately. If he can perform like this in basic scenarios, I need to know what he can do against real challenges." "Sir, the advanced simulations are designed for final-year cadets with months of specialized training," Thorn protested. "Even our best students rarely attempt them until their second year." "Then it is time we found out whether humans operate by the same limitations as the rest of us," Corax replied grimly. The next simulation that loaded was called the Crucible, a scenario so difficult that it carried a warning requiring instructor approval before activation. It was designed to push cadets beyond their natural capabilities, forcing them to adapt and improvise under impossible conditions. Alex read the mission parameters as they appeared on his display. Survive against overwhelming enemy forces in a constantly changing environment while protecting civilian targets and completing tactical objectives. The scenario would adapt in real time to counter any successful strategies, ensuring that each moment would be more challenging than the last. "Beginning Crucible simulation in 10 seconds, the computer announced. In the observation deck, officers from a dozen different species pressed against the windows to get a better view. Some had their recording devices active, documenting what they expected would be either a spectacular victory or a catastrophic failure. Alex centered himself in the middle of the chamber and waited. When the simulation began, he moved with a purpose and confidence that made it clear he had been preparing for this moment his entire life. What the watching aliens were about to witness would change their understanding of warfare itself. The Crucible simulation materialized around Alex like a living nightmare designed by military strategists who understood exactly how to break a warrior's spirit. The environment was a war-torn city under siege, with enemy forces attacking from ground level, rooftops, underground tunnels, and aerial positions simultaneously. Civilian holographic figures cowered in buildings that were already burning, and tactical objectives flashed on his display screen faster than most beings could even read them. Alex surveyed the chaos for exactly 3 seconds, then moved. He ignored every weapon that the simulation offered him. Instead, he picked up a piece of rubble from a destroyed building and began what could only be described as a masterclass in improvised warfare. The first wave of enemy soldiers came at him with military precision, their energy weapons coordinating to create an inescapable kill zone. Alex was not there when their shots arrived. He had already identified the structural weakness in a nearby building and brought it down across the street, creating a barrier that divided the enemy forces. While they scrambled to reposition, Alex moved through the shadows like a ghost, using the urban environment as both weapon and shield. In the observation deck, General Corax watched in stunned silence as the human systematically dismantled a force that should have overwhelmed him within minutes. "He is not fighting them," the Draknari officer whispered. "He is conducting a symphony of destruction." Alex reached the first group of civilian targets just as enemy forces breached their building. Instead of engaging in direct combat, he triggered a controlled collapse that buried the attackers while creating an escape route for the civilians. The holographic figures followed him through passages that seemed to appear from nowhere, guided by someone who understood the flow of urban warfare better than the simulation's designers. The Crucible adapted, sending flying assault units to attack from angles that ground-based defenses could not cover. Alex responded by turning the city's own infrastructure into an anti-aircraft system. Power lines became electrified nets, construction cranes became catapults, and even the sewage system became a weapon as he flooded enemy positions with precisely timed water pressure releases. "This is impossible," breathed a Viridian general whose forearms were trembling with disbelief. "The simulation is designed to counter any successful strategy. It should be adapting to neutralize his tactics." Commander Thorne studied his instruments with growing amazement. "It is adapting, General. The problem is that he keeps changing strategies faster than the AI can process countermeasures. Every time it develops a response to his current approach, he has already moved on to something completely different." Below them, Alex had reached the most difficult phase of the simulation. Enemy reinforcements were arriving faster than he could disable them, while the tactical objectives became increasingly complex. Most cadets would have been forced to choose between saving civilians and completing the mission parameters. Alex refused to accept that limitation. He began orchestrating what could only be called controlled chaos. Using his knowledge of physics and engineering, Alex turned the city itself into a weapon against the invaders. He redirected gas lines to create explosive barriers, used electrical systems to disable enemy equipment, and even manipulated the weather control systems to create fog that concealed his movements while blinding his opponents. The watching officers realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in the history of galactic warfare. This was not just superior combat skill or advanced tactics. This was a completely different way of thinking about conflict itself. "He treats everything as a potential weapon," observed a quartzling admiral whose crystalline body was pulsing. "With rapid calculations. Not just tools and debris, but systems, environments, even the enemy's own expectations. It is as if he sees connections that our minds cannot process." For 47 minutes, Alex moved through the Crucible like a force of nature. He saved every civilian target, completed every tactical objective, and eliminated enemy forces that outnumbered him by hundreds to one. When the simulation finally ended, he stood alone in the center of what had been a war zone, surrounded by the wreckage of an entire army. The observation deck remained silent for a full minute after the simulation. "Shut down!" General Corax was the first to move, his heavy footsteps echoing as he walked to the communication panel. "Cadet Alex, report to the main briefing room immediately. Senior staff wants to speak with you." 20 minutes later, Alex sat at a conference table surrounded by the highest-ranking military officers in the Galactic Defense Force. Their faces showed a mixture of awe confusion, and something that might have been fear. "We need to understand what we just witnessed," General Corax began without preamble. "Your species was evaluated as having limited military potential. Your planet shows no signs of advanced weapon development or aggressive expansion. Yet, you just demonstrated combat capabilities that exceed anything in our databases." Alex looked around the table at beings who had commanded fleets in battles across the galaxy. "May I ask what you want to know?" "Everything," replied Admiral Zenth, a Viridian whose 4 arms were folded in a gesture of deep respect. "How did you learn to fight like that? Where did humans develop these techniques? Why was none of this information included in your species evaluation files?" Alex considered his words carefully. "You evaluated us based on our current civilization, but humans have not always been civilized. Earth is a dangerous world where nearly everything evolved to kill and eat everything else. For millions of years, my ancestors survived by learning to outthink predators that were faster, stronger, and better armed than they were." He stood and began pacing around the conference room. "You asked where we learned these techniques. We learned them from 10,000 years of warfare against each other. Every conflict taught us new ways to adapt, to improvise, to find victory in impossible situations. We developed martial arts, strategy, engineering, psychology, and dozens of other disciplines, all focused on one goal: winning fights we had no business winning." General Corax leaned forward. "But your planet is peaceful now. How do these ancient skills translate to modern combat?" "Because we never stopped studying warfare," Alex replied. "We just stopped practicing it on each other. Every human military academy teaches the complete history of conflict on our world. We analyze every battle, every strategy, every innovation that helped our species survive. We do not fight wars anymore, but we remember how to fight them." The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Admiral Zenth was the first to speak. "You are saying that every human possesses this knowledge?" "Every human who chooses to learn it," Alex confirmed. "It is part of our cultural heritage. We study warfare the same way other species study art or philosophy." General Corax stood up, slowly, his scarred face showing a mixture of respect and concern. "The Galactic Alliance has been approaching human integration incorrectly. We assumed your species would need protection and guidance to participate in galactic defense." Alex smiled for the first time since the briefing began. "With respect, General, I think you have that backwards. While you were perfecting the use of your natural advantages, we were perfecting the art of war itself. We did not join the Alliance seeking protection. We joined because we thought you might need help." The silence that followed was broken by the soft chiming of a Quartzling officer's crystalline body. "If what you say is true, then humanity represents the most significant military advancement in galactic history." "Perhaps," Alex agreed. "But we prefer to think of ourselves as the galaxy's insurance policy. When the next major threat emerges, when conventional warfare fails, when the impossible becomes necessary, Earth's children will be ready." As Alex left the briefing room, the assembled officers remained seated in stunned contemplation. Word of the humans' performance would spread throughout the Galactic Defense Force within hours, and from there to every military command in the Alliance. The age of human military doctrine was indeed about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.